we're discussing Eric Butterworth's views about thinking. And last week we began our series by reminding ourselves that we always have a choice. We looked at ways to exercise that choice, and after the program, our engineer Jeff Comfort and I were talking about the example that I used, which of course was the problem of not getting to work on time, and how you can say, oh, what can I do? I'm just always going to be late, I guess. Or you can say, I'm going to take positive action here by recognizing what I wish to change and recognizing the beliefs and the actions that are causing the unwanted behavior, and releasing the thoughts that control the behaviors and releasing the behaviors themselves. And Jeff and I were talking about how comfy it is, when you're snuggled in bed in the morning, or and maybe you have your pet with you. I like to curl up with a cat if one of the cats is in a curling up mood, but Jeff's got dogs. They're usually more willing. And it's so easy to fall into an old and not really wanted behavior because it's what we're used to doing. We can move beyond that, though, We always can. In this episode, we're going to look at a belief that many people have, that they're kind of controlled, that they're defined by the thoughts that they've held in the past. Eric's going to tell us that this is not true. Let's listen to our opening audio clip for the day, where Eric invites us to take inventory.
It's a good thing, I think, to occasionally take inventory in our lives and to look for the kind of situations that tend to repeat themselves, problems that repetitiously keep manifesting in our work, in our finances, in our health, in our relationships, a person who keeps catching colds, or a person who keeps coming up against financial difficulties, or there is a constant process of unemployment. Every time there's a problem in the office, I'm the first one to be laid off, and so forth. We may object to this, we may argue about it, we may say it's the result of conditions, it's the result of favoritism, and all these terrible things that are going on in the world. But it's so important to begin to realize that bad luck, or a continuity of bad experiences, is a result of bad mental habits, bad mental thought patterns. And you always have a choice. You always have a choice. You may not be able to change the things in the office, you may not be able to change the things in the world, but you can change the way you deal with them, which makes all the difference in the world. And if you don't believe this, take a look at this simple illustration of the sailing boat. Remember that poem of Ella Wheeler Wilcox when she says, some ships drive east and some drive west by the self-same winds that blow. 'Tis the set of the sails and not the gales that determine the way they go. So a ship then can move eastward and westward by setting the sails. And regardless, it's the one wind. So it is in your experience. Regardless of what happens, by changing the way you deal with it, by the attitudes you hold toward it, you can change the whole experience as far as you're concerned. Change all the way from the fact that I have terrible problems to the fact that the world has problems, but I have control of myself.
I have control of myself. Oh boy. 'Tis the set of the sail and not the gale. People who realize this are people who know perhaps the most valuable secret in the world. How many people have we known who really thought that so much of life depended on luck and that they weren't having any? There's even a story that I tell so many times about, and I put different clothes on it, but it involves a person who does everything that he or she thinks they're supposed to do, and including praying and tithing and living a good, clean life, and they don't get the results they want, or they don't think they get the results they want, and finally they ask God, why? Why is this happening? And usually there's a period of quiet, and then a voice from the heaven says, oh, I don't know, there's something about you that just ticks me off. And people have believed that there's something about them that ticks God off. And if God's upset with you, why, there can't be any hope for you, now can there? Well, of course, the God we know is not upset. The God we know is the positive attributes of life, love, wisdom, and so many more. We need to realize that. So if something is happening in our lives that we don't want to continue happening, what we have to do is to change our thoughts about the experience. And that way, we will change the experience, Eric says, as far as we are concerned. Now, do you see that? We will change the experience as far as we are concerned. We may not be able to change what happens in the outer, but we will change the experience as far as we are concerned. Reinhold Niebuhr's Serenity Prayer, which is so well beloved by people in 12-step groups, says, God grant me the courage to accept the wisdom, to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. And let me do that again because I did it wrong, and I don't want my 12-step friends thinking I dishonored their prayer. God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. There are some things in life that we aren't going to change. For example, I travel fairly frequently, and one of the things I hate to see happen is a delayed flight, because that's going to complicate the day. And there have been times where I heard the news of a delayed flight and immediately began to multiply the consequences in my mind, to the point where this delayed flight became a huge obstacle to my happiness, when all it was a delayed flight. That's one of the things that you can't change. So once we recognize that and we adapt to the circumstance that we cannot change, we can have our happiness back. Now, I'm not responsible for the plane being delayed, but I am responsible for what I do in consciousness with that delay, how I respond to it, and how I control my thoughts and my actions once that delay is inevitable. Let's hear more from Eric now about taking responsibility.
So important then to know that if you refuse to accept the responsibility for your thoughts, or as someone would say, to own your own thoughts, and you insist that these things and conditions and your thoughts about them are caused by the things out here in the world, then there's little you can do about changing them. If you're unwilling to accept responsibility for your thoughts, then that's the way life is. What are you going to do? You have no choice. You've heard that. But if you take responsibility for your thoughts, if you always recognize that whatever happens in your mind is a result of your consciousness, nobody made it happen. If you're upset, it's because you were upsettable. If you're disturbed and anxious, it's because of a level of your awareness, not the conditions, not the things. If you take responsibility for them and admit that your states of consciousness within your own mind, then, and then only, are you in a position to fulfill that realization that we suggest every day on the radio. You can change your life by altering your thoughts. You can change your life by altering your thoughts if you know that your thoughts are the problem in your life, not people, not situations, you see. And this is something that requires a great change of the whole general perspective by which we view life. Because I know that most of us tend to be very defensive. We tend to be very reactive. We tend to try to point the finger of responsibility to all sorts of folks. Most of us have a little bit of paranoia within us. We feel that people are always picking on us. The world is always against us. Things are always going wrong for me. And it's terrible, isn't it? But important is the realization that I have the capacity to decide how I'm going to think. I can't change people, I can't change the world, but I can change what I think about them, and then, to all intent and purposes, I can change my life by altering my thoughts.
World around me, but I can change what I think about them, how I respond to them. Understanding this very simple, but not necessarily easy, truth gives us a tremendous amount of power in our lives and helps us reclaim energy that we might have been wasting in defensiveness. One example that all of us can relate to likely is a traffic jam, or if you don't drive, perhaps a delay in whatever transportation you take. You can't control the traffic jam, but you can control what you do once you find yourself in a traffic jam. You can establish new mental habits. Instead of feeling frustration, and of course you may be late for an appointment, and of course the person who had the accident that caused the traffic jam might have been late for an appointment himself or herself, and through inattention caused the accident that made them even later. But you cannot control it once it has started. What are you going to do? Well, traffic jams used to be a major event in my life because of the distance I drove to work. I drive a much shorter distance now and don't really see traffic jams. But when I see delayed traffic, instead of feeling that knot begin to form in my stomach, I begin to bless. Let go of whatever negativity, release it, and begin to bless, to know that I will flow more easily and I will be more in control as I learn to bless instead of awfulizing the experience that's already happened. When I'm going out to do a workshop or a conference at a church or other place, they'll ask me what I want for technology, and I'll tell them, I want the projector and the internet connection if they have it. And I always add, if you don't have these things, and if you can't get them, we'll work without them. And every now and again I have to work without one or the other, and I've always discovered that if I go with whatever is happening, take advantage of the opportunities that situation has to offer, the experience will always be a positive one. I haven't seen it fail. But of course, I have to be in tune. I have to take responsibility for my own thoughts. I remember at least one time in my life when I really wanted to watch a particular television program, and there were thunderstorms around, and the power went out. And at least once I can recall that I took it as a personal affront that the power was out and I was not able to watch that program. I really got myself steamed over it. I can laugh about it now, but I couldn't laugh about it then. Interesting, huh? The other issue I want to address here is defensiveness. So often we have this spoken or unspoken desire to be viewed as flawless, to be looked at as perfect. There was a line of hair products whose motto was, if you don't look good, we don't look good. When we spend too much energy on looking good rather than being clear in our own consciousness, we can get ourselves awfully tired. Now, I really don't know what Eric Butterworth would have thought of A Course in Miracles. I never talked with him on the subject, and I have not yet come across any of his thoughts on it. I don't know what you think of A Course in Miracles. I know that I find some things of value in it, and perhaps the most valuable of these is Lesson 153, which says, "In my defenselessness, my safety lies." In other words, if I can learn to move totally beyond defensiveness to defenselessness, I'm safe. I accept facts as true, and I don't try to pretend they aren't true. I don't try to cover up. I just deal with what is. There's a tremendous freedom in doing that. And yeah, I'd love to say I've got this one mastered, that I do it this way all the time. All I can tell you for sure is that I have a lot more success than I at one time did in being defenseless. As a teacher, it used to be a nightmare for me when someone in my class knew more about a particular topic than I did, or when someone caught me in an error. I try to catch myself in errors, and when I've got live guests here, I invite them to catch me too. I've gotten to the point now where I can say to my students in a class or to my guests on a program or to you, if you hear me make a mistake and want to set the record straight, let us know about it. Let us know about it. And I begin most classes by reminding the people that there's not one person in the room who doesn't know more about something than I do. I am who I am, I know what I know, and I'm a growing, evolving soul, just like you are, just like everybody is. I take responsibility for my own thinking, and I invite you to do the same. And as we do this, as each of us takes our own inventory, takes our own responsibility, the results are so gratifying. Life really becomes more beautiful. And we'll continue with more of our discussion about this beautiful life when we return after these messages on Discovering Eric Butterworth on Unity Online Radio. We are Unity.
You are listening to Unity Online Radio, the voice of an awakening world. To support this ministry, go to www.unity.fm and click on Donate Now. Your contribution helps us broadcast messages of love and inspiration throughout the world.
Today I stand firmly in my faith. I meet life courageously and confidently, seeing beyond appearances to underlying good. Through faith, I overcome every limitation. I know that God's power within me is greater than any situation I may have to meet or overcome. God is greater than any condition or circumstance. Through faith, I am fearless and free.
This inspirational message is brought to you by Daily Word. Daily Word. Inspiration and practical teachings to help people of all faiths live healthy, prosperous, and meaningful lives. Give Daily Word to yourself or a friend and give the gift of hope, joy, peace, and encouragement. Order your subscriptions today online at dailyword.com.
I'm one with you, you're one with me, together we are unity.
We now return to Discovering Eric Butterworth with host Tom Thorpe.
Welcome back to our second segment of this edition of Discovering Eric Butterworth on Unity Online Radio. I'm Tom Thorpe. I'm your host for the program, and this week you're my co-host because it's just a conversation between you and me about a subject that I find vitally important. It's something we can't help doing. We're doing it all the time. Thinking. Yeah. I've tried forms of meditation where I was invited to close down my thought stream. I've never been able to do it. I've talked to a couple of people who can. We're always thinking, who say they can, at least. I can't get inside their head and know. We're always thinking, so we owe it to ourselves to think in the ways that we choose to think. And I'm glad you think of tuning in to this broadcast, either live or on a podcast. I'm happy to share these thoughts with you. I'm happy to share Eric's wisdom. And I want you to know that by listening to our program, you are supporting the work of Unity Online Radio. By downloading podcasts, inviting your friends to listen to this and some of our many other programs, you're supporting our work even further. And of course, as I tell you every week, there's also the opportunity that we all have to support this work financially. Just go to www.unity.fm and hit the donate button. It's a very easy process, it's secure, and it helps assure that our work will continue. We really do appreciate your support. Thank you so much. And I also want to thank our engineer, Jeff Comfort, who maintains our excellent sound quality and keeps our programs on the air well organized. We're on the air 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and that's largely because Jeff has things so well arranged that the programming operates beautifully even when he's not here. It's just a beautiful thing. I'm reminded of a story of a motivational speaker who was speaking to a group of high school junior boys, and he said to the boys, "You are what you think." And one boy in the group frowned. He said, "No, I can't be what I think." "Well, why can't you be what you think?" And the lecturer asked. He said, "Well, if I were what I think, I would have turned into a girl about 2 years ago, because I think about girls all the time and very little else." Eric Butterworth's about to tell us that we are not what we think. Let's listen.
So there's a very subtle point that is rarely observed in metaphysics. You've heard this statement, you've read articles about it, there are whole books about it. You are what you think, right? You are what you think. And I say that is totally inaccurate. You are not what you think. Now that seems to be rather a paradox, because here we are talking metaphysics, and this is a general axiom in metaphysical studies: you are what you think. I say it's totally inaccurate. You are not what you think. You are thinking what you think. Now this is not splitting hairs. This is a very important distinction. You are not what you think. You are thinking what you think. Because the you that thinks what you think is more than the thoughts you're thinking. The thoughts are in your mind, and you have the power to control your mind. If I am what I think, then my thoughts are me. And if my thoughts are negative, then I'm negative. And what am I going to do about it? That's just the way it is. I'm just a negative person. I was born that way. My parents have been that way. That's the way I grew up, you see. But I'm not what I think. I think what I think. And I have the capacity to think what I want to think if I decide that I have that capacity and begin to exercise that prerogative. You are not just a mind that thinks. You are a unique and wonderful identity within infinite mind, and you have the power to think what you want to think and to react as you train yourself to react. Now this is very important. It's not a simple thing. We're expressing it in a very simple way, but it's a very fundamental truth that is important.
Yes, yes. You are thinking what you think. Such an important difference. I can't even, I can't overemphasize it. You know that we are defined, we're defined in the Bible, we're defined by our interpretation of Unity's teachings. We are defined as the image and likeness of God. We are defined as points of consciousness, points of awareness in the one mind. We are not our thoughts. Get that idea away from you, because for all of us there have been thoughts that we might wish we hadn't held on to. There have been thoughts that, if they defined us, we would be certainly less than the image and likeness of God that we are. We also must remember, as we've been saying since we began this series, that if the thoughts that we are holding aren't working for us, we can, first by owning those thoughts as our own creations, change them. It's important that we own them as our own creations, because we can't change necessarily what someone else did. We can only change what we do. Do you see that? We can only change what we own, what we take responsibility for. And this would include our thoughts. When we begin to explore our thoughts, we discover by looking at them what we believe. We have 3 levels of belief system at least. We have our public belief system, which is what we tell the world we believe. We have our private belief system, which is what we tell ourselves we believe. And then we have our visceral or gut-level belief system, which is what we really believe, those kinds of beliefs that control our actions even when we aren't conscious of the belief itself. Yeah, we have those kinds of belief. If you've ever found yourself sabotaging an important step in your life just when it was about to happen, there was probably a belief behind it, a belief that was controlling you, a belief that you had assented to on some level and then forgotten about. If you found yourself sabotaging a relationship, it's the same thing. Sometimes, if we find ourselves in a repeated health condition, our own thoughts about it can be at least part of the issue we're facing. I don't want to go telling anybody that they are the sole reason why they are experiencing illness, that their thoughts are. But we always have to ask ourselves, what have our thoughts had to do with this situation, and what can we do to make a positive change? This is something that's really, really important to consider. Our visceral beliefs are going to control us. Part of our work in looking at our thoughts, at reflecting on our thoughts, is to get down to the level where we can examine what some of those controlling thoughts are. We're not going to make a huge difference just by mouthing positive words that we have no way of accepting. I don't know if you've ever tried to paint rusty wrought iron furniture, but if you have, you know that you have to prepare it first. You have to get rid of as much of the rust as you can and prime it. Otherwise, your paint job's not going to be successful. The paint won't stick, and you'll end up with a bigger mess than you started with. And so it's important that we understand what we need to be about, this process of recognizing, releasing, and redirecting our thought energy. Eric's going to talk to us now about positive thinking. He has a take on it that might surprise you a little bit.
So you see, what we call positive thinking, this has been a very popular term. Everybody knows about positive thinking, starting, of course, with Norman Vincent Peale and probably starting along before that. The idea that if you think certain positive things, you're going to have certain positive conditions in your life. And it's a wonderful thing, and it's changed a great deal of the general thoughts and feelings of people in the world, and I'm sure it's had a great influence. But let me say this, positive thinking is not sitting around holding thoughts, filling the mind with platitudes and self-motivating images. It's not what is normally considered custom-made thinking. You see, normally you say, positive thought is this. If you have a particular situation or challenge, think about it with this kind of a thought. Da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. And if you're having trouble with your love affair, then think about it this way. Da-da-da-da-da-da. So you're given the kind of thoughts that you should think. And you want to program your mind with these thoughts, and this is going to make a lot of difference in your life. This, you see, is not essentially positive thought at all. Positive thought is a matter of tuning yourself in to the infinite positive, which is the creative process that always flows within you. Positive, you see, in metaphysical teachings, there's a lot of emphasis on building things into the subconscious mind. Quite often it's said, now if you take these truths and build them into your mind, program your mind with these positives, then you're going to have a creative and fulfilling life. But this is not exactly fulfilling the spiritual process. You do not ever need to build truths into your subconscious mind. Now again, this goes against the grain of a lot of things you've heard if you've studied metaphysics. You don't have to program truths into your subconscious mind. Because if it is truth, it is already the essence of infinite mind, and you are the creative expression of infinite mind. You are an identity within it. So the key is not to fill up the mind with metaphysics, but to wake up the consciousness to the fundamental level of your nature, which is already fundamental truth. You are a spiritual being, not you can be. This is why we say so often, there's no point in trying to be more spiritual. You can never be any more spiritual than you already are, because you are a creative creature, a spiritual being, formed in the identity of the infinite process within you. This is what you really are. You can't change this. You can change your awareness of it. You can wake up to it. So it's not building it into your mind, keep saying the thing over and over and over to yourself, because it's like the person who says to himself, I'm not afraid, 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 and what he's really saying is, I am scared to death. So oftentimes when we insistently program certain things into our subconscious mind, there is something within our mind that's saying, in a sense, boy, I must be awful upset or they wouldn't be giving me all this junk. You see. That isn't the key. It's not programming the mind with positives, but it's waking up the mind to the deep underlying positive which is the truth of your being. You are the creative expression of this infinite process. When you think of yourself as being capable and creative, you are not going to make yourself capable and creative. You cannot say to yourself over and over, I'm a creative creature, I'm a creative creature, I'm a creative creature, I do creative things beautifully, wonderfully all the time. And you're not going to become creative because you keep saying that to yourself. Now that's one of the little bits of misinformation that come into this whole study of truth. You're not going to be creative because you say you're creative, but when you understand the technique involved, you say you're creative because you know that innately you are creative. It's very subtle, but it's important.
Okay, you say you're creative because you know innately that you are creative. In other words, what Eric Butterworth is telling us is that we aren't going to make real progress simply by pumping statements into our consciousness. It's not going to happen that way. Let's take a look, a little deeper look at what he said. This is a tremendously important idea. Positive thinking is not filling the mind with pre-programmed thoughts. The old joke about calling the metaphysician when you have a headache, she or he will tell you to take 2 affirmations and call them in the morning. Well, that's just not the way it works. The way it works is to address consciousness, to do what's required to address the consciousness. This seems like a lot of work. But when we take it one step at a time, it can yield such gratifying results. Eric is telling us, don't fill up the mind, but wake up the consciousness. Do you see? It's like that old spaghetti sauce ad where the man goes into the Italian boutique grocery store and he wants to buy all the ingredients for making his own very special, unique sauce. So the clerk puts a bottle of a particular brand on the counter, and he says, it's in there. And he mentions esoteric ingredients. It's in there. And so he buys the sauce and goes home, and the company that makes the sauce is happy. Well, it has a parallel in our spiritual life. Have you ever said, I'd really like to be more spiritual? Eric Butterworth just told us that we can never be more spiritual than we already are. What we can be is more aware of how spiritual we are. Do you see the difference? It's a very, very important difference. What we are, and I've said this so many times that I almost hope you're tired of hearing it by now. I hope you're saying, Tom, we know that. I mean, this is a given by now. We are defined as the image and likeness of God. We are defined as the Christ. Nothing's going to change that definition. What will change is our awareness of who we are. So when we just pump in words, the beautiful example, I'm not afraid, I'm not afraid, I'm not afraid, and really I'm scared to death, reminds you of Shakespeare, you protest too much, methinks. It's really the idea of getting to the subconscious by creating the environment of trust where our subconscious thoughts can come out and we can work with them. We can work on looking at our subconscious thoughts, our visceral beliefs, and doing something about them. You cannot make yourself creative by saying to yourself that you're creative. You unleash your creativity by recognizing how creative you are. Do you see that very subtle difference? You can't put something into yourself that isn't already there. Oh yeah, we're not talking about food here. We're talking about consciousness. We're talking about energy. We're talking about identity. Our work in consciousness is not to fill ourselves up, but really to take inventory and learn to appreciate what we are, the gifts that are ours, to learn how to use them more effectively. We'll be back right after these messages with our final segment of this edition of Discovering Eric Butterworth on Unity Online Radio.
2,088 hours. That's how long most of us will spend at work this year. You'll spend about the same amount of time sleeping. So when does that leave time for the stuff that really matters, like your spiritual practice? The good news is your spirituality doesn't have to be separate from your job. It can and should be woven into everything you do, especially in the workplace. New from Unity Books, Good Business, Putting Spiritual Principles into Practice at Work. Charlotte Shelton, co-host of the Unity online radio show Good Business, brings you insights from some of her top guests. Learn from 20 good business leaders, including Brian Tracy, Rianne Eisler, Peter Block, Daryl Connor, and Margaret Wheatley. They'll show you how to bring spiritual principles into alignment with best business practices to create thriving, sustainable organizations and fulfilling lives for the people who work in them. Make the most of your 2,088 hours. Tune in to Good Business Mondays at 4 p.m. Central and purchase the new book, Good Business, online today at www.unitybooks.org.
How's life working for you? Would it be okay with you if it got easier, simpler, yet more meaningful, more vibrant? Join Reverend Carla McClellan Tuesday afternoons for spiritual coaching, creating a vibrant life. Each week, Carla visits with leading-edge coaches as they explore the sacred purpose and stunning results of this exciting and emerging coaching model. Together, they reveal the secrets and successes of this transformational process. Call in and join the discussion as Carla creates a safe and sacred space to dialogue about real life and real-world transformations. That's spiritual coaching, living a vibrant life with Reverend Carla McClellan. Tuesdays at 1 p.m. Pacific, 4 p.m. Eastern, right here on Unity FM, the voice of an awakening world.
I'm one with you, you're one with me, together we are unity.
Now, back to Discovering Eric Butterworth with Reverend Tom Thorpe.
Welcome back to our third and final segment of this edition of Discovering Eric Butterworth on Unity Online Radio. We're talking about thinking, and we're well into our second episode on this subject. We've been talking about positive thinking and how positive thinking is not filling your mind with affirmations, but rather getting in touch with the truth about yourself. And I pray that by now you see that important difference. The truth about yourself cannot be changed. It's your awareness of it that can be changed. And your awareness of it that can be changed once you own your own thoughts. So many times we're limited by beliefs, and we can be free of those beliefs once we recognize that we created them. If somebody else created them, they would have to uncreate them. But since we did, then we are the ones who can get the work done. In this next audio clip, Eric's going to encourage us to say what we believe. Let's listen.
See, because unless you add that, I'm saying I'm creative because I know I'm creative, and you're trying to make something happen, which can never really happen because you do not actually believe it. You say, I am a totally uncreative person, but I'm trying to become creative by saying I'm creative. But deep within you, while you're saying I'm creative, and I'm creative is something in back of it all that's saying, but I'm still the uncreative person I always was. And you don't really change that at all. You don't change that. This is the little bone I have to pick with the so-called self-image psychology. You can program your mind with a whole new image, plaster it over your subconscious mind with a whole new image of yourself and a whole new way of seeing yourself, but back of it all is the same scared little person you've always been. You simply act differently. You simply put on a facade, but underlying it all is the same person because you really believe you're uncreative, you see. So when you think of yourself as being capable, you don't make yourself capable. You simply let the light shine through your innate potential. One of the teachers says, this example, when the weather vane points to the north, it does not make the north wind blow, but it simply registers the fact that the north wind is already blowing. Now, isn't that beautiful? It's a very important thing. You don't make it happen because you say it, but you say it because that's what is true, you see. And this is a fundamental aspect of truth. Say what you believe, and you believe what you say. You begin to express it in a whole different way. Positive thinking does not make creative power, and it doesn't change God or conditions. Positive thinking simply attunes you to the power that is and can never change, can never be altered. You become one with this mental power, and it shines through you. Positive thinking, creative thinking, is thought that essentially is in tune with the infinite. Maxwell Maltz refers to the mind as a servo-mechanism, and a lot of metaphysical studies place a great deal of emphasis on this. Thinking of the mind as a giant computer that will work for you if you program it with the right data. This takes your mind out of the context of the whole of mind. You see, your mind is not separate from infinite mind. If you can get some of the positives of infinite mind into your mind, then you're going to be a creative person. You are already and can never be less than an identity within infinite mind. This is what you always are, a state of consciousness within mind. You can change your consciousness. Your consciousness may limit and obstruct in the same way that it may expand and creatively express. But it's for you to do the changing.
It's for you to do the changing, yeah. So here he summarizes beautifully what we've been talking about for most of this hour, that your subconscious mind needs to be accessed, and you need to look at what is there. And I'm saying you need to a lot. It's to your advantage to. You can continue your life in any direction you choose, as long as you take responsibility for the direction your life is going. Remember, you can't change what happens, but you can always change how you respond to it, how you think about it. So just as we were talking in the last segment about painting over the rusty wrought iron chair without preparing it, creating a new image and overlaying it over the one that we're really holding viscerally, just isn't going to work. I'm going to invite you to listen to this broadcast at least 2 or 3 times. I know that as I've been preparing it, as I've been putting the audio clips together and taking notes on them, I'm seeing things that I've been able to talk about with a greater degree of clarity. This idea of getting down to our deeper thoughts, the ones that are hiding, the ones that we have to develop a sense of safety before they'll come out, that's so tremendously important. When I think of myself as being capable, the first thing I need to do is listen. Is there some part of me that says, no way? Is there some part of me that I need to do some healing work with? I know in my life there has been. I expect that probably in your life there has been also. I have believed some things in the past that are not the truth about myself. And the way to address those things is not to shame myself for believing them, not to simply ram a statement on top of them to replace the error, but first to release the error. In Unity's metaphysical system, we talk about affirmation, and we also talk about release that generally needs to precede the affirmation. We think of ourselves as being capable, and then we are letting our light shine. When we think of ourselves as being capable, and a part of us says, no, you're not, we know that we have some work of releasing and redirecting thought energy to do. Eric says to say what you believe, and you'll end up believing what you say. If we try to say something that is not true, our whole being revolts against it. I don't know what day of the week you're listening to this broadcast. It's live on Tuesday, and today is Tuesday. So if I were to say today is Wednesday, I can say that as many times as I want, and it won't be true until after the clock turns at midnight. You see, affirmation does not make something true that is not. Affirmation can't work in your life unless you are believing what you say. You cannot believe the truth of an affirmation unless you've prepared the soil of your consciousness to hear it. Positive thinking, Eric Butterworth says, is in tune with the infinite, in tune with the divine mind that is your home and my home. Think about this. We are never separate from divine mind because divine mind is what you and I are. Can you see the treasure of that? Can you see the tremendous value of it? It's so exciting that it's almost how shall I even say it? It's almost impossible to overstate it. When we recognize the truth about ourselves, there's no limit to what we can become. Now, our mind is not a tool that we use. It is a part of divine mind. So Butterworth looks at the work of people like Maxwell Maltz, who calls the mind a servo-mechanism, and disagrees rather firmly with him because he says that to think in this way takes us outside the connection. It's not a connection, it's a unity between our individual awareness and divine mind. It puts us into a duality where our mind is something that we work on rather than something that we are. We have one more audio segment that we want to listen to today. It's called From Within Out. So let's hear that now.
We want to get this distinction between working with the mind from without and working with mind from within as an intuitive flow to be released. Paul talks about this. He makes this clear distinction when he says, don't let the world around you mold your life from without, but let God remold your mind from within. Don't think of your mind as a fact collector. Don't think of the process of truth, of trying to get it into your consciousness. Quite often people say, I've read this book. People tell me this all the time. I've read your book, and I've read it 3 or 4 times, and I'm certainly trying to get it into my consciousness. Save the effort. Don't try to get it into your consciousness. The book is not putting thoughts in your mind, but if it's going to be important at all, it's going to be little spark plugs that are igniting within you the awareness of that which you've already believed. If you read something, as we often do, read something and say, hey, that's great. We underline it. And we underline it with the subtle thought that I somehow want to try to remember that. I want to get it into my mind. The fact that you underline it is because you already remember it with a remembrance that precedes the writing of the book. You remember it because you've woken up to a consciousness within yourself that knows that that is true. So say yes to it. That's all. Say yes to it. Amen. Yes. Great. Wonderful. True. It is. It's now true. It can never be less than true. Don't try to get it into your mind, but know that the recognition of it is a releasement of the positive power that is already flowing forth out of your mind. Not filling up, but waking up, you see. Now that's a very important insight and one that we can so easily forget.
Okay. Did you hear the excitement there? He's citing Romans, Paul's letter to the Romans, chapter 12, verse 2. Don't be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Now, you ever notice how sometimes when you take inventory, you discover treasures that you didn't know you had, and you can delight in them all over again? It's something that, as Eric has told us earlier, we ought to do from time to time, just to appreciate. And one of the things that we want to do in our renewal process is to remember that the mind, as he tells us, is not a fact collector. The mind is not a fact collector. Yeah, we have databases, but the primary function of our mind is to remember the truth. So it's not about trying to get anything into our consciousness. It's rather about waking up what is already there. You know yourself, you've seen situations where you're reading a text and all of a sudden, yeah, boy, I resonate with that. This is the spark plug effect. And this is the reason, I hope at least, why you were drawn to this broadcast and broadcasts like this one. They resonate with something that you know is true. You remember the truth with a remembrance that Eric Butterworth tells us precedes the writing even of the book. All truth is one, and so many of the inspiring things we read take us back to that one. They remind us of it. Do you see that? So what we want to do is to remember that truth is. Truth doesn't change. It's our awareness of truth that is constantly changing. It appears to us sometimes that truth changes, but that's not the case at all. It's our ability to recognize that it's growing and evolving and sometimes getting a little bit stuck. So don't attempt to get truth into your mind. Just allow yourself to recognize the truth that is. Do you see? Doing this makes our whole experience so much more positive and puts us in an awareness of the divine flow that we're always in, whether we would realize it or not. So we've covered a lot of ground today. We have begun by looking at the idea of taking inventory. And we've looked again at taking responsibility for our thinking. We've reminded ourselves that we are not what we think, because what we are has already been designated and can't be changed. We are the Christ. We are the image and likeness of God. We focused on positive thinking, understanding that positive thinking may not be what you thought it was. It's not putting truth ideas into your mind, but it is uncovering the truth that you already know, that you already are. We're not going to make something true by saying it. We must release the blocks first. We must make ourselves aware of our true nature, our true origin. And we can decide whether we're going to take the outer approach, which is really the slow way, or whether we're going to take responsibility for our work from within. Next week will be the final segment of this series on thinking. I hope you plan to be with us, and remember that you can listen to the entire lecture, the lecture in its entirety, on www.truthunity.net. It's in the section on metaphysics. It's lecture number 3 of the first series. So this brings our program to a close for another week, and I've enjoyed sharing it with you. Every now and again, I like to have a conversation just with you, my listeners, and share what's in my heart and listen to what Eric has to say, just you and me together. So thank you for sharing this program. Thank you for being with us today. Namaskar.
I'm one with you. You're one with me. Together.
Thank you for tuning in to Discovering Eric Butterworth with Reverend Tom Thorpe. Join us every Tuesday at 5 p.m. Central Time for more insights into Eric Butterworth's powerful truth message and how you can apply it to your life today. This program is brought to you in part by Unity Institute Spiritual Education and Enrichment. Make SEE your gateway to spiritual enlightenment. Online at www.unity.org/education/SEE. Discovering Eric Butterworth, only on Unity FM, the voice of an awakening world.
I'm one with you. You're one with me. Together we are unity.
You have a good life and are grateful for it. But what if you stretched beyond good and shifted to amazing? Join Reverend Temple Hayes, Senior Minister of the First Unity Campus in St. Petersburg, Florida, as she guides you on a journey to an amazing life. Transcend the need for acceptance of others and be an example of living the truth. Empower your life and fully express the wondrous energy, love, and joy you hold in your wildest imagining. Joyfully and actively know that more important than what happens after you die is the deeper and enriching concern for what happens while you're living. How can you experience an amazing life right now? Learn how each week on From Good to Amazing. Mondays at 4 p.m. Central Time right here on Unity Online Radio, the voice of an awakening world.
Inspiration only takes a moment. Take a moment now to reflect on these words from Reverend Joan Gattuso. According to an ancient Hindu teaching, if you can only speak the truth and tell no lies, either minuscule or outrageous, for 12 consecutive years, you can attain enlightenment. A noble being will always tell the truth. Do you? Begin now with the first step of simply noticing if you do tell the truth immediately, or if your first instinct is to alter the facts a bit. Resolve to be honest with yourself and others starting today. And after 4,383 days, you just may become enlightened.
This meditative moment is brought to you by Unity.